Captain Lee Daeho looked out at the black space through the big window of his ship. The bright stars seemed so far away and cold he could feel his heart beating fast, but not because he was scared. He was excited. Today was the day they had been waiting for 3 long years. The Lucky Star looked like any other old cargo ship. It had rust marks on the outside and dents from flying through space for many years. The paint was coming off in some places, and the engines made strange noises when they worked, but this was exactly what they wanted. The ship needed to look weak and broken. Daeho walked slowly across the bridge where his crew was working. Their faces were serious, but he could see they were ready for what was coming. These people had trained for this moment every single day for months. They knew their jobs, and they were the best at what they did. Park Ji-woo sat at the navigation controls. Her fingers moved quickly over the buttons and screens. She had been flying ships since she was very young and could make any ship do what she wanted, but today she had to make the Lucky Star look like it was being flown by someone who was scared and did not know what they were doing. Kim Taemin was at the communications station. He had spent 2 years learning how to speak and write in the alien language. The Crotons used the same language across their whole empire, and every ship had to know it. If they wanted to talk to them today, he would have to sound like a human who was begging for his life. The cargo hold was full of people, but they were not real refugees. They were soldiers from Earth who had volunteered for the most dangerous mission anyone had ever thought of. They wore old clothes and carried bags that looked like they contained family pictures and personal things, but hidden inside their bags were weapons that could destroy entire buildings. Daeho remembered the day when Earth first learned about the Croton Empire. A small ship had crashed near the moon, and inside were 3 aliens who were running away from their home planet. They told horrible stories about the Crotons and how they had taken over hundreds of worlds. The aliens said the Crotons were so strong that no one could fight them, but humans were different from other species in the galaxy. Humans did not give up when things looked impossible. Instead, they got creative. They started thinking of ways to win that no one had ever tried before. The plan they made was so crazy that even their own military leaders thought it might not work. The Crotons had rules for how they took over planets. First, they would send their big warships to orbit around the world. Then they would demand that everyone surrender if people tried to fight back. The Crotons would destroy cities until everyone gave up. After that, they would take all the smart people and useful things back to their empire. But the Crotons had one weakness. They had been winning for so long that they always expected the same thing to happen. Every species they met would try to fight them with big ships and powerful weapons. When that failed, the survivors would try to run away in whatever ships they could find. The Crotons had seen this pattern thousands of times. That was why the Lucky Star was perfect for their plan. It looked exactly like a refugee ship trying to escape from Earth. The cargo hold was full of families who seemed to be carrying everything they owned. The ship had almost no weapons, and the hole was thin enough that Croton weapons could cut through it like paper. Daeho touched the small device hidden in his jacket pocket. Inside was all the information about the real plan. Only he and 5 other people on the ship knew everything. The rest of the crew and soldiers knew their own jobs, but not the bigger picture. This way, if something went wrong, the Crotons could not learn about the whole plan. 3 months ago, Earth had sent out 50 ships like the Lucky Star. Each one was disguised to look like refugees running away from different human colonies. Some ships were pretending to carry scientists. Others had fake families with children. All of them were heading toward different Croton fleets that were spread across human space. The Lucky Star was targeting the biggest and most important Croton fleet, the one commanded by their most famous general, the ship that served as the mobile capital of their empire. If the plan worked here, it would work everywhere. If it failed, Earth would probably be destroyed within days. Daeho walked over to the sensor station where Lee Dong-hyuk was watching the screens. The young man had trained as both a computer expert and a soldier. He could hack into alien systems and fight with weapons equally well. Today, his job was to watch for the Croton ships and let everyone know when they were close. Suddenly, the screens lit up with red dots moving toward them from the direction of the Croton fleet. Dong-hyuk looked up at Daeho and nodded. It was time to start the most important performance in human history. The Croton ships were huge compared to the Lucky Star. The smallest ones were 10 times bigger, and the largest was like a flying city with millions of people living inside. The weapons on just one Croton ship could destroy Earth's moon in a few minutes. But today, those weapons were not important. What mattered was that the Crotons thought they knew what was happening. They had seen refugee ships before, and they had procedures for dealing with them. They would demand surrender, then send soldiers to board the ship and take everything useful. The humans on board would either become slaves or be killed, depending on what the Crotons Nidedaho activated. Ship's internal communication system, his voice went to every person on the Lucky Star, including the soldiers hiding in the cargo hold. Remember everyone, we are not trying to win a battle today, we are trying to change how the whole galaxy thinks. About the Croton Empire Park Jiwoo made the ship's engines stutter and shake like they were about to break down. She changed course several times as if the pilot was panicking and could not decide which way to go. The Lucky Star started sending out emergency signals that made it seem like the life support systems were failing in the cargo hold. The soldiers were putting on their final disguises. Some of them used special makeup to look injured or sick. Others practiced crying and looking scared. The children were actually small adults who had been changed with medicine to look younger. Every detail had to be perfecta. Communication system came alive with the deep voice of a Croton commander speaking in their harsh language. Kim Taemin listened carefully, then looked at Daeho. The Crotons were demanding that they stop their ship and prepare to be boarded. They had 5 minutes to comply or they would be destroyed. Taemin, who sent back a message in broken Croton that sounded like it came from someone who was terrified, "Please do not hurt us. We are just trying to save our families. We will do anything you want, just let the children live." The response came back quickly. The Crotons would board their ship and decide what to do with them based on what they found. Anyone who tried to resist would be killed immediately. All weapons had to be thrown out into space. Right now Daeho smiled as he gave the order to dump their fake weapons into space. The Crotons would see old human guns and simple explosives floating away from the Lucky Star. This would make them think the humans had given up their only way to fight back. They would never guess that the real weapons were hidden inside medical supplies and children's toys. As the Croton boarding ships launched toward them, Daeho felt the excitement building in his chest. In a few hours, the most powerful empire in the galaxy would learn that humans were not like any enemy they had ever faced. The war was about to begin, but the Crotons did not know it yet. The Croton boarding pods hit the side of the Lucky Star with loud metal sounds that went through the whole ship. The pods looked like giant black eggs with sharp points that dug into the hull. Once they were attached, the Crotons started cutting holes to get inside their ship. Captain Lee Daeho watched from the bridge as sparks flew from where the aliens were cutting. He could hear the sound of metal being torn apart. The Crotons had done this thousands of times before, and they were very good at it. In just a few minutes, they would be walking through his ship. The first Croton to come through the hole was huge. He was twice as tall as a human and had 4 arms that ended in claws. His skin looked like gray stone, and his eyes glowed red in the dark. He carried a weapon that was bigger than most humans could even lift. Behind him came 12 more Croton soldiers. They moved through the ship like they owned it already. Their heavy boots made the floor shake with each step. They did not seem worried about anything because they had never met humans who could fight back in ways they did not expect to. Minesco was waiting in the first corridor with her fake daughter. The little girl was actually a 25-year-old soldier named Bayuna who had been changed to look like a child. The medicine that made her small also made her voice sound young, but she was one of the best fighters on the ship. Minesco started crying as soon as she saw the Croton soldiers. She fell to her knees and wrapped her arms around Yuna, who began crying too. Their tears were real because they had practiced this scene so many times that their bodies knew how to react. The Crotons looked at them for a moment, then kept walking. The aliens were looking for 3 things: weapons that could hurt them, valuable things they could take, and people who might be useful as slaves. They had sensors that could find most kinds of weapons and computers that could tell them what everything was worth. But the humans had spent 3 years learning how to fool those sensors. The weapons hidden throughout the ship were made from materials that looked like medical supplies or children's toys on Croton scanners. The most dangerous explosives were disguised as baby food, and medicine engineer Kim Taemin was in the engine room pretending to fix a broken part when the Crotons found him. He looked up at them with wide, scared eyes and started talking very fast in broken Croton. "Please do not hurt me. I am just trying to keep the engines working so we do not die in space." Delete. Croton soldier grabbed Timon by the shirt and lifted him off the ground. The alien was so strong, he could have broken every bone in the human's body without trying hard. Timon let his body go limp and whimpered, like he was too scared to move. What the Croton did not know was that Timon had been planting tiny devices throughout the engine room. While pretending to work, the devices were so small they looked like dust, but each one contained enough explosive power to destroy a building. When the time came, they would turn the Lucky Star's engines into the biggest bomb the Crotons had ever seen. The medical bay doctor, Yu Hansol, was taking care of people who looked like they had been hurt, trying to escape from Earth. He had fake blood on his hands and was working on a man who seemed to have a broken leg. The patient was actually Lieutenant Park, Ji-sung, who was perfectly healthy. The soldiers watched Hansel work for a few minutes. They seemed interested in human medicine, but not worried about it. Their own medical technology was much more advanced, so they thought human medicine was primitive, and harmless. Hansel kept working. While the aliens watched him, his hands never stopped moving as he cleaned wounds and gave medicine to his patients. What the Crotons could not see was that every medicine bottle in the room contained something that could kill them. The bandages were made from material that would turn into poison gas when heated. The fake patients were all soldiers who had volunteered to let Hansel practice on them with real medical tools, so their injuries would look completely real. Some of them had actually let him cut them or break their bones, so the Croton sensors would not be able to tell the difference. Sergeant Choi Yoon-ji was in the cargo hold with 30 other fake refugees. They were sitting in small groups and talking quietly like families do when they are scared. The Crotons walked between them and scanned them with handheld devices that could tell if someone was carrying weapons. The aliens found nothing suspicious because the humans had hidden their weapons inside their own bodies. Small devices had been surgically placed under their skin, where Croton scanners could not detect them. Other weapons were built into fake teeth or hidden inside artificial bones that had been put in place. Months Egwanji was talking to an old woman who was actually Corporal Lee Hai-jin. The two women were having what looked like a normal conversation about their families, but they were actually sharing information about where each Croton soldier was and what weapons they were carrying. Crotons had divided into 4 groups to search the ship faster. This was exactly what the humans had hoped for. It would be much easier to deal with small groups than to fight all 16 aliens at the same time. When the signal came, each group would be attacked by soldiers who knew exactly where they were. The alien commander was a massive Croton with scars across his face from many battles. He walked through the ship like he was already planning how to divide up everything he found. His name was Gorth, and he had conquered 47 different planets during his long career. Gorth stopped in front of Captain Deho, who was sitting on the floor with his hands behind his head like a prisoner. The Croton looked down at the human and spoke in his deep voice, "You are the leader of this pathetic ship. Tell me where you have hidden your real weapons." Deho looked up at the alien with tears in his eyes. "We threw all our weapons into space, like you told us to. We do not want to fight. We just want to live. Please let my people go. They have done nothing wrong." The performance was perfect because Deho really was scared, just not for the reasons the Croton thought. What Deho was really scared about was that the plan might not work. If even one thing went wrong, the Crotons would discover what they were really doing. Then Earth would be destroyed and billions of humans would die. But he could not let any of that fear show in the wrong way. Gorth studied the human captain for a long moment, then turned away. He had seen this same behavior from the leaders of every other species his people had conquered. Fear made all creatures act in similar ways, and humans seemed to be no different from the rest. The Croton soldiers continued searching the ship for 2 more hours. They found exactly what they expected to find: a cargo hold full of scared refugees, some valuable minerals and technology that could be useful to their empire, and a crew that was too frightened to cause any trouble. What they did not find were the microscopic robots that had been released into the ship's air system as soon as the boarding pods attached. The tiny machines were already spreading through the Croton's equipment and weapons. They looked like ordinary dust particles, but they were actually the most advanced technology humans had ever created. The robots were programmed to wait for a specific signal before they started working. When that signal came, they would begin eating the metal and electronics in every piece of Croton equipment on the ship. Within minutes, the aliens would find themselves with weapons that did not work and armor that was falling apart, but the most important part of the plan was still to come. The Crotons had to take the Lucky Star back to their main fleet before the robots activated. If the trap was sprung too early, the other Croton ships would know something was wrong, and the whole plan would fail. Gorth finally gave the order to his soldiers. The Lucky Star would be taken back to the Worldbreaker, where the High Command could decide what to do with the humans and their cargo. The refugees would be processed according to standard procedures, and anything valuable would be added to the Empire's resources as the Croton soldiers prepared to move the ship. Deho caught the eye of Ominesio, who was still holding her fake daughter. The woman nodded slightly to show she understood it was time for the next phase of their plan. The real performance was just beginning. The Worldbreaker was the largest ship anyone had ever built. It was so big that it had its own gravity and weather systems inside. Cities existed on different levels of the ship, with millions of Crotons living and working there. The ship was like a moving planet that could destroy entire solar systems. Captain Lee Deho felt the Lucky Star being pulled into the massive cargo bay of the Worldbreaker. The bay was so huge that hundreds of ships like theirs could fit inside with room to spare. Giant metal arms grabbed their ship and moved it to a parking spot next to dozens of other captured vessels through the small window. Deho could see other refugee ships from across human space. Some had been there for weeks, waiting to be processed. The Crotons were very organized about how they handled conquered people. They had done this so many times that they had turned it into a simple routinely. Dong Hyuk was hiding in a ventilation shaft that ran above the main command center of the Worldbreaker. The young man had crawled through the ship's air ducts for 3 hours. To reach this position, he was wearing a special suit that made him invisible to Croton sensors and muffled any sounds he made below him. Commander Zach Stahl was talking to other Croton officers about the progress of their invasion of human space. The alien was massive, even for a Croton with 8 arms instead of the usual 4. His voice was so deep that it made the metal walls vibrate when he spoke. The humans are even weaker than we thought, Zoxdal said as he pointed to a holographic map showing Earth and its colonies. This conquest will be finished in less than a week. Dong Hyuk was recording everything the alien said with devices hidden in his suit. The information would be sent back to Earth using a quantum transmitter that could send messages instantly across any distance. The Croton Empire had no idea that humans had this technology. What the Crotons did not know was that 47 other refugee ships had been captured by their different fleets across the galaxy. Each ship contained the same thing, a crew of human soldiers pretending to be scared, civilians and cargo holds full of the most advanced weapons Earth had ever created. The microscopic robots that had been released on each ship were now spreading through the Croton fleets. They looked like space dust to alien sensors, but they were actually tiny machines that could eat through metal and electronics. The robots were designed to remain dormant until they received a specific activation signal. In the detention area where the fake refugees were being held, Sergeant Choi Yoon-ji was teaching her soldiers how to communicate without speaking. The humans had developed a complex system of hand signals, body movements, and even breathing patterns that could share detailed information. Guards thought the humans were just comforting each other like scared animals do. They had no idea that the refugees were actually planning the most complex military operation in galactic history. Every movement and gesture was carefully planned. To share tactical information, Ominesio was still playing the role of a worried mother protecting her fake daughter Bayuna. The two women had become experts at appearing helpless while secretly coordinating with other soldiers throughout the detention facility. They used a combination of sign language and coded phrases that sounded like normal conversation. Dr. Nam Jun-ho looked like a weak old man who could barely walk without his cane. What the Crotons did not know was that his cane contained some of the most advanced scanning equipment humans had ever built. Every time he moved around the detention area, he was mapping the ship's structure and analyzing alien technology. The old man's dentures were actually tiny computers that could hack into Croton systems. His walking was slow because he was stopping at specific locations to plant microscopic transmitters that would help coordinate the attack when it came. His age was completely fake, created with makeup and act. Crotons had assigned a young officer named Calx to watch over the human refugees. The alien was new to his job and thought guard duty was boring. He spent most of his time playing games on his personal computer and ignored the quiet conversations happening around him. What Calx did not notice was that the humans were using their conversations to map every guard position in the detention area. They knew exactly how many Crotons were on duty, what weapons they carried, and how long it took them. To make their rounds, the information was being shared through their secret communication system. Meanwhile, in the command center, Commander Zoxtal was receiving reports from other Croton fleets across the galaxy. Every report said the same thing. Human resistance was collapsing faster than expected. Refugee ships were being captured every day, and no organized military response had been detected. The humans are running like all the others. Zoxtal told his officers their leaders have abandoned their people and fled to unknown regions of space. Within days, we will control all their colonies and their homeworld will surrender without a fight. This species offers no challenge to our empire. What the commander did not know was that every refugee ship his people had captured was actually a weapon aimed at the heart of his empire. The humans had not fled in panic. They had carefully positioned their most dangerous soldiers inside the Croton fleet using the aliens' own procedures against them. Dar Shin Hyung had spent 5 years designing the microscopic robots that were now spreading through 47 different Croton ships. Each robot was programmed with detailed information about alien technology and knew exactly which systems to target for maximum damage. The robots were currently in their reconnaissance phase. They were mapping every ship they had infected and sending detailed information back to Earth. Through quantum transmitters hidden in the refugee ships, the data was being used to plan the final phase of the operation back on Earth. Military leaders were watching real-time information flow in from across the galaxy. They could see the layout of every major Croton ship, the location of critical systems, and the movement patterns of alien crews. The information was more detailed than anything they had hoped to gather. General Park Min-young was coordinating the entire operation from a secret base. Hidden beneath the Pacific Ocean, she had 47 different refugee ships to manage and thousands of soldiers who were all depending on perfect timing. If even one ship activated too early, the entire plan would fail. The general was watching a countdown timer that showed exactly when the robots would be ready for activation. Every infected ship had to reach the proper position within the Croton fleets before the signal could be sent. If they attacked too early, some ships might escape and warn the rest of the empire in the detention area of the World Breaker. The fake refugees were making their final preparations. Weapons that had been hidden inside their bodies for months were being carefully extracted and assembled. Medical supplies were being converted into explosives and communication devices were being activated. Sergeant Choi Yoon-ji looked around at her fellow soldiers and felt proud of what they had accomplished. Every person in this room had volunteered for a mission that would probably end in their death. They were willing to sacrifice themselves to give their species a chance at freedom. The Croton guards had no idea that the scared refugees they were watching were actually the most elite soldiers humanity had ever trained. These people had spent years learning alien languages, studying Croton technology, and preparing for this exact moment. They were ready to change the course of galactic history. As the countdown timer on Earth reached its final hours, the microscopic robots throughout the Croton fleet were preparing for activation. In just a few more hours, the most powerful empire in the galaxy would learn that humans were not like any enemy they had ever faced. The war was about to begin, but it would not be the kind of war the Crotons expected. Instead of massive space battles and direct confrontation, they would face an enemy that attacked from within, using their own strength and arrogance against them. The age of Croton dominance was about to end. The microscopic robots had been designed by the smartest humans who ever lived. Dr. Shin Hyung had spent her whole life studying how to make machines smaller than anything anyone could see with their eyes. Each robot was so tiny that millions of them could fit on the head of a pin, but together they could destroy the largest ships ever built. The robots had been spreading through the Croton fleet for 72 hours now. They moved through air vents, crawled along metal walls, and hid inside computer systems. The aliens had no idea that their most secure ships were being invaded by an army they could not see or detect communications. Officer Kang Woo-bin was still pretending to be a scared refugee, but he was actually listening to every message the Crotons sent between their ships. His equipment was disguised as a small music player that looked broken and worthless. The aliens had no idea it could intercept their most secret communications from what Woo-bin could hear. The Croton Empire had captured refugee ships from 17 different human colonies. Each ship was now sitting in the cargo bay of a major Croton warship, the aliens thought they were processing defeated survivors, but they were actually welcoming humanity's most dangerous weapons into their fleet. The beauty of the human plan was how simple it was. The Crotons had conquered thousands of worlds, and they always saw the same pattern. First, the defenders would try to fight with their military. Then, when that failed, civilians would try to escape in whatever ships they could find. The aliens had procedures for both situations. What the Crotons had never seen before was an enemy that used their own expectations against them. By giving the aliens exactly what they expected to see, humanity had turned the Crotons' greatest strength into their biggest weakness. Their experience had made them a predictable mechanic. Sun Yujin had volunteered for one of the most dangerous jobs on the mission. She was working in the lower levels of the Worldbreaker, where the main power systems were located. The area was full of radiation and toxic gases that would kill most humans in minutes. But her protective suit kept her alive, was pretending to fix damaged equipment while actually planting more robots near the ship's primary power core. The robots here had a special job. They were designed to create a chain reaction that would spread through the entire ship's electrical system. When activated, they would cause every system to fail at exactly the same time. The Croton engineers, who supervised her work, thought she was just another primitive human trying to be useful. They had no respect for human technology. She would be harmless. This attitude gave her access to areas of the ship that were normally restricted to high-ranking officers. The robots were not just spreading randomly through the ships, they were following a carefully planned pattern designed by Earth's military strategists. Each robot knew exactly where to go and what systems to target. The goal was to cause maximum damage with perfect coordination across the entire fleet intelligence. Specialist on Soyoung had been studying command structures for weeks by watching how the aliens communicated with each other. She discovered that their entire military operated like a giant machine where every part depended on constant communication with Central Command. The communication network could be destroyed at exactly the right moment. The entire Croton fleet would be paralyzed. Ships would not be able to coordinate with each other, and individual commanders would not know what to do. The aliens had never learned to operate independently because they had never needed to. The robots were programmed to attack 3 specific systems simultaneously. Power generation would be destroyed, first leaving the ships without energy for weapons or life support. Communications would be cut next, isolating every ship from the rest of the fleet. Finally, life support systems would begin failing, forcing the aliens to focus on survival instead of fighting. Darnam Junho had been secretly analyzing samples of Croton technology using equipment hidden throughout his fake medical supplies. Every scan revealed new weaknesses in their systems. The aliens had built their ships to be powerful, but not flexible. They could handle direct attacks, but not subtle sabotage from within. The old man had discovered that Croton computer systems all used the same basic programming. This meant that a virus designed for one ship would work on every ship in their fleet. The robots carried information that would allow them to hack into any Croton system and turn it against its owners back on Earth. General Park Min-young was watching data streams from all 47 infected ships. The information was being transmitted through quantum communicators that the Crotons could not detect or block. She could see the progress of every robot swarm in real time. Robots had reached critical mass in 35 of the 47 ships. This meant there were enough of them to guarantee complete system failure. When they activated, the remaining 12 ships would reach critical mass within the next 6 hours. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. What made the plan even more brilliant was that the Crotons were actually helping to spread the robots themselves every time. They moved equipment between ships or transferred personnel from one vessel to another. They carried more microscopic invaders. The aliens were unknowingly participating in their own destruction. Commander Zach Stahl was in his private quarters reviewing reports from across the Empire. The conquest of human space was going better than expected. Most colonies had already surrendered, and Earth itself would fall within days. The humans seemed to be even weaker than the intelligence reports had suggested. What the commander did not know was that Lee Dong-hyuk was hiding in the ventilation shaft directly above his room. The young human had been listening to every conversation and recording every piece of information. The data was being transmitted back to Earth to help plan the final phase of the operation. The robots in Zoxtal's ship had reached his personal quarters and were now infecting his private computer systems. They had access to the most secret files in the Croton military, including battle plans, communication codes, and information. About other species in the Empire. Sunyu Jin had finished her work in the power systems and was now moving to the ship's main computer core. The area was heavily guarded, but the Crotons thought she was just a maintenance worker who had been assigned to clean the corridors. They paid no attention to her as she planted the final group of robots. Computer core was the heart of the Worldbreaker's intelligence systems. From here, the ship coordinated with the entire Croton fleet and managed communications across half the galaxy. When the robots attacked this system, the aliens would lose control of their most important military assets in the detention area. Sergeant Choi Yoon-ji was making final preparations with her team. The weapons they had hidden inside their bodies were now assembled and ready. The fake medical supplies had been converted into explosives, and the communication devices were active. The soldiers had divided into small teams that would attack different parts of the ship simultaneously. Some would target the bridge where the commanding officers worked. Others would secure the hangar bays to prevent escape. The goal was to capture the ship intact so it could be used against other Croton vessels. Omanesco and her fake daughter, Bayuna, had been assigned to secure the ship's armory. The two women had spent months learning the layout of Croton warships and knew exactly where to find the weapon storage. The aliens would be helpless without access to their advanced firearms and armor. Dr. Yuhanzel had a different job. His medical knowledge was needed to keep the captured Croton officers alive, for questioning the information they provided would be crucial for understanding how the Empire operated and how to defeat other Croton fleets. The countdown was entering its final phase. In less than 6 hours, the activation signal would be sent, and 47 Croton warships would simultaneously lose power, communications, and life support. The aliens would find themselves trapped on dying ships with no way to call for help. But the most important part of the plan was still to come. The goal was not just to destroy Croton ships, but to send a message that would be heard across the entire galaxy. Every species that had been conquered by the Empire needed to know that the aliens could be martyred. The robots were now in position throughout the fleet. Each microscopic machine knew its target and was ready to begin the attack that would change galactic history. The Croton Empire had ruled for 2,000 years, but their reign was about to end in a way they could never have imagined. The activation signal came from Earth. At exactly the planned moment, Dr. Shin Hayoung pressed a single button in her underground laboratory, and instantly every microscopic robot in the Croton fleet received the same command: begin the attack. The message traveled faster than light using quantum technology the aliens did not know existed. Captain Lee Daeho felt the world breaker shudder around him as critical systems began failing throughout the massive ship. The lights flickered and went out, leaving only emergency power that cast red shadows on the walls. The constant humming sound of the life support systems stuttered and died in the command center. Commander Zoxtal roared orders at his officers as their control screens went dark. One by one, the main power grid had collapsed, and backup systems were failing faster than they could be activated. Alarm sounds echoed through the ship as automated systems tried to report thousands of simultaneous failures. The Croton crew ran between control stations, pressing buttons and checking connections. But nothing worked there. Most advanced technology was being destroyed from the inside by machines too small to see. The robots were eating through metal and electronics faster than the aliens could understand what was happening. Now Daeho whispered into his hidden communicator. The single word was heard by every human soldier throughout the ship. It was the signal they had been waiting for 3 years to hear. The time for pretending was over. Throughout the world, Breaker fake refugees dropped their disguises and revealed the weapons they had been hiding. Sergeant Choi Yoon-ji pulled advanced plasma rifles from inside fake medical equipment. Her team had trained for this moment. Until they could assemble their weapons in complete darkness, the Croton guards were completely unprepared for what happened next. They had been watching scared civilians who suddenly became deadly soldiers. The humans moved with precision and speed that the aliens had never seen before. Each person knew exactly what to do and where to go. Minesco revealed her true nature as an explosives expert by activating charges she had placed throughout the detention area. The fake daughter she had been protecting was actually Bayuna, a combat android designed to look like a human child. The android carried enough firepower to destroy an entire city block. Crotons had superior strength, and their armor was designed to stop the most powerful weapons, but they were not ready for the tactics the humans used instead of direct confrontation. The soldiers used speed deception and coordinated attacks to confuse and overwhelm their enemies. Li Donghyuk dropped from the ventilation shaft directly into the command center, carrying weapons that had been disguised as maintenance tools. The young man had spent months mapping every corridor and access point in the ship. Now he used that knowledge to appear exactly where the aliens least expected. Engineer Kim Tamin had been waiting in the engine room for this moment. The devices he had planted while pretending to repair equipment were actually sophisticated bombs designed to turn the ship's own power systems into weapons. When activated, they would create an explosion visible from Orbithak. Crotons tried to use their communication systems to coordinate a response, but the robots had destroyed every network on the ship. Individual aliens found themselves fighting alone without support. From their commanders, they had never learned to operate independently because their empire was built on central control. Dr. Yu Hansol opened his medical supplies and revealed that every bottle and device was actually a weapon in disguise. The bandages released poison gas when exposed to air. The medicine containers held acids that could dissolve Croton armor. The fake patients he had been treating joined the attack. Within 30 minutes, the humans had captured the bridge, disabled the weapon systems, and secured the main computer core. The Croton officers who survived were taken prisoner and restrained using their own security equipment. The most powerful ship in their fleet was now under human control. But the attack on the Worldbreaker was only one part of a much larger operation across the galaxy. 46 other Croton warships were experiencing the same system failures. The microscopic robots had activated simultaneously, creating chaos throughout the entire fleet communications. Officer Kong Wubin established contact with the other human teams and confirmed that the plan was working perfectly. Every infected ship had lost power and communications. The Croton fleets were blind, helpless, and unable to coordinate any kind of response. Mechanic Sun Yujin had taken control of the Worldbreaker's power systems and was using them to send a signal across the entire galaxy. The message would reach every inhabited world and tell them what had happened. The age of Croton domination was ending. Intelligence specialist An So-young was downloading information from the ship's computers. The data included star maps showing every Croton military base, communication codes for their entire fleet, and detailed information about other species in the Empire. The intelligence would be invaluable for future operations. Dr. Nam Junho was examining captured Croton technology with equipment that was far more advanced than anything the aliens possessed. His analyses revealed that their entire civilization was built on old designs that had not changed for centuries. They had become complacent and stopped innovating. The Croton prisoners were shocked by what they were seeing. Human technology was clearly superior to their. The Empire had seriously underestimated this new enemy commander. Zoxtal was brought to the bridge in restraints. The massive alien could barely believe what had happened. His flagship, the most secure vessel in the Croton fleet, had been captured by creatures he had dismissed as weak and primitive. The humans had turned his own arrogance against him. Deho stood before the alien commander and spoke in perfect Croton. "You made the same mistake your people have made for 2,000 years. You assumed that every enemy would fight the same way. Your experience made you predictable, and predictability is a weakness we could exploit." The human soldiers were already preparing for the next phase of their mission. The captured ships would be used to attack other Croton facilities and rescue enslaved populations throughout the galaxy. But more importantly, 47 of their most powerful warships had been captured simultaneously by an enemy they had dismissed as helpless. The impossible had happened, and every enslaved species in the galaxy was learning about it. Back on Earth, General Park Minyoung was receiving reports from all 47 teams. The mission had succeeded beyond their most optimistic projections. Not a single human soldier had been lost, and every target ship was now under their control. The Croton Empire had suffered its first major defeat in over a millennium. But the real victory was not military, it was psychological. The Crotons had ruled through fear and the belief that resistance was impossible today. That belief had been shattered. Every species in the galaxy now knew that the Empire could be beaten. The revolution was about to begin. The humans had not just captured ships, They had captured hope itself. The message would spread from world to world, inspiring rebellions and resistance movements that had been dormant for generations. The Croton Empire was about to face enemies on every front as the emergency lighting flickered through the worldbreaker. Captain Deho looked out at the stars and smiled. The war was far from over, but today humanity had proven that even the most powerful enemy could be defeated through intelligence, creativity, and the courage to try something that had never been done before. Captain Lee Deho stood in front of the massive communication array on the bridge of the worldbreaker. The equipment was more advanced than anything humans had ever built and could send messages to every corner of the galaxy instantly. Behind him, Commander Zoxtal was chained to a chair, forced to watch as his mighty empire began to crumble. The other human teams had confirmed their success across 47 different Croton fleets. Every major warship in the Empire was either captured or destroyed. The aliens who had ruled the galaxy for 2,000 years were suddenly powerless and confused. Their greatest strength had become their greatest weakness. This message is for the Croton High Council and every species currently under their rule. Deho spoke into the transmitter, knowing his words would be heard on millions of worlds. My name is Captain Lee Deho of the Human Defense Forces. What you have witnessed today is not an act of war. It is a demonstration. The communication reached 17 different star systems simultaneously. Each one contained billions of intelligent beings who had lived their entire lives under Croton rule. Many species had forgotten that freedom was even possible. They had been slaves for so long that they could not imagine any other way of life. For 2,000 years, the Croton Empire has ruled through fear and overwhelming force. Deho continued, his voice carrying across the galaxy. They have conquered countless worlds because they convinced everyone that resistance was impossible. Today, we proved that their greatest weapon was never their ships or their technology. It was the belief that they could not be defeated. The broadcast showed footage from inside multiple Croton vessels, all of them now under human control. The aliens' most advanced warships, which had been thought invincible for centuries, were sitting dead in space, while human soldiers walked freely through their corridors. Dr. Shin Hai-young had calculated the psychological impact perfectly. The Croton Empire's power depended on the perception of invincibility. By demonstrating that humans could infiltrate and destroy their most secure vessels using nothing but deception and microscopic robots, they had shattered that perception forever. On the planet Zarian, the blue-skinned Zephyrians had been enslaved for 800 years. They worked in massive factories building weapons for their Croton masters. When the message reached their world, millions of workers stopped what they were doing and looked up at the screens in wonder and disbelief. The Croton overseers tried to shut down the transmission, but their control systems had been infected by the same microscopic robots that had destroyed their fleet. The tiny machines had spread through every piece of Croton technology in the galaxy, turning their own communication network against them. We are not asking the galaxy to follow humanity, Deho explained. We are simply proving that the Crotons can be beaten. Every species has the right to determine its own fate. Today marks the beginning of the end for the Croton Empire, not because we destroyed their ships, but because we destroyed their greatest weapon. The fear that kept you all in chains on the mining world of Gravix, the rock-eating Stonican had been forced to dig tunnels for Croton construction projects. Their bodies were perfectly suited for the work, but they had dreamed of freedom for 3 generations. When they heard the human captain's words, they began to sing ancient songs of rebellion that had been forbidden for centuries. The Croton guards tried to stop the singing, but the Stonican outnumbered them 1,000 to 1. The aliens had always controlled through intimidation. But intimidation only worked when people believed they had no choice. The humans had given them something more powerful than weapons. They had given them hope. Communications Officer Kong Wubin was monitoring transmissions from across the galaxy. The response was immediate. An overwhelming rebellion began on dozens of worlds as enslaved populations realized that their oppressors were not invincible after all. The Croton Empire was collapsing from within them. Transmission ended with coordinates for every crippled Croton vessel, inviting other species to witness the aftermath firsthand. The humans wanted everyone to see that the impossible had happened. The most feared military force in galactic history had been defeated by an enemy they had dismissed as primitive in the water world of Aquatica, the dolphin-like Cetaceans had been forced to use their natural sonar abilities to locate resources for the Croton Empire. When they received the coordinates, they immediately began swimming toward the nearest captured warship. Their excitement created songs that could be heard across entire oceans. The Croton High Council tried to maintain order by claiming the broadcast was fake propaganda, but too many people had seen the evidence. The coordinates led to real ships that were really under human control. The Empire's credibility was destroyed, along with their military power. Intelligence specialist On Soyoung had been studying the political structure of the Croton Empire and knew exactly what would happen next. Without their military superiority, the aliens had no way to maintain control over their vast territory. Every subject species would begin demanding independence. The humans had not just won a battle, they had started a revolution that would spread across the entire galaxy. The Croton Empire would spend the next months trying to suppress uprisings on hundreds of worlds while dealing with human forces that seemed to appear everywhere. At once back on Earth, General Park Min-young was coordinating the next phase of the operation. The captured Croton ships would be used to liberate enslaved populations and establish communication networks between rebel groups. The humans would not try to replace the Croton Empire, they would help every species achieve true independence. Dr. Nam Junho was analyzing the technology captured from the Croton fleet and making an amazing discovery. The aliens had not invented most of their advanced equipment. They had stolen it from species they had conquered over the centuries. The Empire was built on theft, and Lies engineer Kim Taman was working with Minesco to modify the captured ships for human use. The vessels were powerful, but they could be made even more effective with human technology. The combination of Croton engineering and human innovation would create the most advanced fleet in galactic history. The rebellion spread faster than anyone had expected. Within 1 week, uprisings had begun on over 300 worlds. The Croton military tried to respond, but they no longer had the ships or communication systems needed to coordinate their forces. The Empire was fragmenting into isolated groups. Commander Zaxtal watched in horror as reports came in from across his former empire every day. Fight back. The psychological impact of the human demonstration was more destructive than any weapon. Sergeant Choi Yun-ji was leading a team to rescue prisoners from a Croton labor camp when she realized how much the galaxy had changed. The guards surrendered without fighting because they knew their empire was finished. The fear that had kept billions in slavery was gone forever. The human soldiers were eventually rescued by Earth's hidden fleet vessels that had been disguised as asteroids and space debris while positioning themselves throughout Croton territory. The war that followed lasted 3 years, but the outcome had been decided in that first moment when the galaxy learned the truth. Captain Deho stood on the bridge of his ship and looked out at the stars, knowing that history had been changed forever. The Empire fell not to superior firepower, but to the revolutionary idea that no tyranny, no matter how ancient or powerful, was truly unstoppable. Humans had proven that even the most feared enemy could be deceived, infiltrated, and defeated by those brave enough to try. Their greatest victory was not the technology they created or the battles they won, but the hope they gave to every enslaved species across the galaxy. Sometimes the most powerful weapon is simply showing others that victory is possible. The galaxy would never be the same because 47 human ships had dared to pretend they were something they were not. The age of the Croton Empire was over, and the age of freedom had begun.